So welcome to this month's free tutorial here on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. We're going to do a mushroom, which is actually from a group, from a lady in a group, another artist. Her name is Katie Sykes, and she is on the Colored Pencil Tips for Beginners on Facebook, which is where I am at most of my days. Katie, I was looking for some input on what my next free tutorial should be. And she used her own reference photo, which is right here. And I have my black and white. And then also, if you look in the description, you will find the colored photo, the black and white, and you will also see the line art as well. So I'm going to be using the Faber-Castell Polychromos, and I have a 24 set. I kind of wanted to do a smaller set to help you learn how to blend more with less colors, so that you can kind of, feel and understand how colors will blend and make new colors if you don't have them. So I think this will be a great tutorial for that. We have a lot of bright colors mixed with a lot of greens. And of course we are limited, but this doesn't mean that we are actually limited. So let's jump right in. Okay, so let's actually start. Let's start with the stem. This type of mushroom is called an Amanita muscaria, and it's one of the most popular toadstools that you will see. It's very popular. It's beautiful. It's always like very recognizable with the red cap, reddish orange, and then it has the white spots. So I feel like this was also the mushroom that they used in Mario. It's quite possible. So we're actually going to start. Let's get out some grays. Again, I have my 24 pack of the Polychromos. I'm going to do the warm gray too. And I'm going to start underneath the cap, and I'm going to add this warm gray too in here. You're going to notice that they're on the stems of these, they get like almost like hairy. My husband and I and my kids, we actually like to go foraging and find mushrooms quite often. So a lot of times in recognizing the different mushrooms, you have to know what their gills are, if they're connected or if they're not, and just identifying them. It's a really a good time. It's a lot of fun. So you get these ones that get like skirts on them. They're neat. So I'm just going to kind of round my pencil a little bit, just sort of give it these round feels here. And we'll add some of that flakiness that you're seeing on that part of the mushroom too. And we'll use possibly a little bit of blue in there. Just, it would be the slightest amount. Let's actually put some over here too. This is warm gray too. And they have these very porous stems. Like if you ever broke one open, or even just a mushroom in general, they're very airy, light and airy. Some of them are like sponges. There are certain mushrooms that are called boletes, and they're very, very spongy. So the Amanita actually has gills. So we're working on the stem. This is the cap. These are scales, and the spores come out of where the gills are. And that little skirt thing is up under here. It's when the cap like breaks away from and exposes the gills. And you get that neat little skirt that comes out. Okay, I'm going to start adding just some of these, just some lines in here, just to give it a bit of a texture. We're just going to slowly add that, but allow some of that paper to still shine through. Come along here. Okay, get out your white. Let's blend some of those colors together. We're going to keep adding stuff. This is the pastel matte paper, and we can keep layering lots and lots of layers of these colors on top of each other. So this is actually the brown color of the pastel matte. I was going to do white, but then I realized that I was going to have a lot of dark colors in the wooded part around this mushroom, so I didn't want to do that. I thought going with a more like a neutral color, not so bright, we could get away with a lot more. Not that it's cutting corners or anything, it just helps soften the whole picture, plus it's easier to see when you're drawing. Because if we were using white, we'd probably have to add an awful lot of gray just to get it to show up. White on white can be very tricky. You got to use a lot of blues, a lot of grays, sometimes browns to make it look white. So I'm just kind of using some flicking motions, going back and forth too, and just working my way down that stem. We'll add a little bit in here. We've got a lot of shadows in there. And don't worry too much if you cover up some of these lines that you have drawn that's over top of the stem. Because it is pastel matte, you will be able to draw over it and it won't be that big of a deal. I'm going to put a little bit around here, just a very light layer. We want to make sure that we keep this side kind of darker. Now my picture here is about 4 inches. This is the part that you see in the brown. 4 inches by about 5 1/4 inches. And I have it in the downloads to the exact size that I'm using. So that makes it kind of easy. So you are already using the same size that I am using. So I'm going to come back in with my warm gray too. I'm just going to kind of darken this up. Now I'm not pushing hard, I just want to add a little bit more of this shadow in here. And you should start to see a little bit of a roundness to it. And I think I'm seeing a little bit. Let's put a little bit of our raw umber, and we're going to put it like right here. And it looks weird, but there's a shadow, and it's so slight. So be extremely light-handed. Let's just put a little bit of this raw umber in here. And it is, I'm telling you, it's very light-handed. You don't want to go in heavy on this. Okay, and then go back over it. Let's layer very light over top of that raw umber with our warm gray too. The warm gray too I find to be such a base color. Like it's one of my foundation colors, I guess you'd call it, out of the Polychromos set. It is just so versatile whenever it comes to blending. I mean, it blends blues and greens. It just does an excellent job with just blending. I love the warm gray too. Okay, now that we have a little bit of that coloration in there, I love it. Just going to keep blending it a little bit. Let's go in again with our white. Let's try to avoid some of these areas. Now this is very dark up here, and we're going to darken it up. I'm going to come in and I'm going to put some more white in here. Just keep looking at your picture, your reference photo. If you need to sharpen your pencil, do so. Don't feel bad that you need to. So you want to remember these are very like fibrous. The stems have lots of texture in there. So I'm making some vertical lines kind of up and down the stem just to give it more of a textury feel. And then we can just come in here and add a few of those brighter textures that you see. If you look real close at it, you'll be able to see it. And then you have these sort of like fuzzy lines, or like shelves almost, of just like fur. It almost looks like, you know, it's funny, like I like this mushroom, I think it's really pretty. But my absolute favorite, I think, is the coolest little thing. There's a couple of them. I really like, aesthetically, I guess I should say, because eating is a whole different game here. But aesthetically, I love the look of Old Man of the Woods. It is a black, hairy mushroom. And I love to eat that mushroom. I don't find it very often. They're very hard to spot. I know last year my kids, my son found like 9 of them, but they were all too old to eat. And what's funny about them is when you cook them, like they're black and gray. You should look it up. So if you need to, you want to Google it, it's Old Man of the Woods. But when you cook it, it turns like this red color, and then it goes to gray, which it's so fun to see it just, you know, change like that. But then the one that I really like to eat, which we get just about every year, it's called chanterelles, and they're an orange mushroom. They look like, they're kind of, I don't want to say they're like a trumpet, but they kind of look like a trumpet. There's all kinds of mushrooms out there. Obviously, you need to identify them before you eat them, and you know, you want to be around somebody who has seen and who can identify properly and that you trust. But I wouldn't recommend just going out and finding mushrooms if you don't know what you're looking for. Don't do it. Because there are some out there that will kill you or hurt you very badly. Okay, so now I have my, let's see, what do I want to do? I have my warm gray 5. I want to use a little bit of some raw umber too, and get some of these darker values that are up underneath this mushroom cap. So let's start with our raw umber, and let's just like kind of bring it in. I'm going to still be light-handed about this, because even though it's dark in there, it's not black. So we don't want to go in and just, you know, we don't want to go in with black and just completely black it out. You could make it muddy. You know, you could lose the whole focus of the picture here. So we don't want to do that. So let's add some of this. I'm going to do some loose circles. Just a few loose circles just to get that dark a little bit more. Maybe bring it down in here just a little bit, and some loose circles again. Get your warm gray 5, and let's blend this area a little bit. I'm going to be very light-handed because I do not want to dig at the paper. I love the color mixing, but I don't want to add too much. It's so easy to add too much and then have to lift off. I've done it several times in my lifetime. We don't always get it right. Creators aren't always perfect, but we strive to be, so that we can teach others and do things correctly the first time. But it happens. Sometimes we mess up. So a lot of my tutorials will, I wouldn't say a lot, a few of my tutorials as I grow, I have had to take the tape and pull off some pigment, which isn't terrible. So if you do add too much, there are options. Don't stress. Okay. So I'm going to come along down the edge of this. Now I'm not adding a line. I don't want to just make a dark line. I want to blend this and make like a shadowed spot rather than just like a dark line. In nature, there are like no lines. It's so, they're just like invisible, but you know, they're like, there's separation there. So we're just trying to mimic that in nature. Okay, so I'm going to add some more here. And the warm gray 5 here is a bit too dark, but that's the beautiful part about colored pencils, is we're going to go through and go over top of it with lighter, and it's going to blend it, and it'll be just fine. Okay, we've got a little bit maybe down in here. I see a lot of shadows down here from the grasses and all these, like, I don't know, it looks like moss. I almost thought it was princess pine, but it's not. I think it's just moss. They look like little pine, moss looks like little pine trees when you get real close to them. And I think there's a fern, a little bit of a fern leaf over in this area. Okay, so on this side, there's not a whole lot of dark. Let's actually take our warm gray 2 and let's add a little bit of it in here. Just to tone down those browns and make it look more like a shadowed white than a brown mushroom. See how it does that? Just work our way along the edge here. Now I'm just going really light because I'm just sort of blending in that white a little bit. We're going to blend in these stripes too. Those are like the fuzzies, but we don't want them to be super bright. We're just going to sharpen our white, and we're going to make the really tiny velvety kind of look rather than having like stripes. You probably hear my fish tank. I just cleaned out the filter and it's going nuts. Okay, let's use our white and let's put on some more of the finer details of the velvety pieces. So we have these stripes here that are like the frills almost. All that nice soft look. So once you get that to a point that you want it to be, let's blend this just a little bit further. And then let's take our white and really look at your reference photo and decide on where you want to put these brighter areas. So they're going to be very small. Obviously, this is a very small piece. So we're going to be looking at more of like these areas on here. And it's a little bit brighter over here too. So let's actually work there. It's a bit fuzzy too, so we don't have to get too detailed here. So let's just do our small tight circles. Rotate your pencil to get a sharp point, and by that I mean just like spinning it a little bit with your fingers. So when you rotate, you get like a sharper edge on the tip of your pencil. We're just trying to cover some of that tooth and add some of this brighter color in here. Okay, and then when we come into these areas, I mean, you're going to see those stripy areas, but we're going to come down and we're just going to add little bits here that are just a bit brighter, and they don't have to be super sharp either. It seems that we have some fuzzy spots, so we can even add some like spots in there, just like a dot. I'm just going to follow these down. If you need to sharpen your pencil to keep that nice sharp point, go for it. And let's see, seems to be a vertical lighter area here. And I'm just going to make a few vertical brighter areas just to give it that more fibrous look. It doesn't have to be like just straight lines. You can connect them. Take a little bit of liberty on that with your artistic creativity. And it adds some texture to it. See, it's starting to look fibrous and just textury. It just looks real lovely. Looks great. We can add even just like broken up lines, like spots almost. Connect them with other ones, other lines and spots. Just get creative with that. Now we don't see a whole lot back here. It's very out of focus, but if you wanted to just even add something in there, it'll add to it, even if you can't really see it that well. I'm just going to do a little bit in here, very light-handed on this. So because we have just a 24 set, I'd be using other colors at this point to make some softer shadows and values, but I'll show you what we're going to do. I'm going to sharpen up my warm gray 5, and underneath some of these lines here I want a little bit more of a darker value. So let's come in and let's like add just a little bit more, just a little bit. You can be a little bit speckly with it to add some more texture. You can add even top and bottom to give it more shape, make it fun. You can even connect the two sides. And I'm not pushing really hard, but I'm going to come back through with my warm gray 2, and we're going to soften all of those colors up. So do small tight circles very lightly, and you're going to go across all of those areas that you just went across with that warm gray 5. And see, we're just kind of smushing them around a little bit, toning them down, because it's not super dark, but we definitely have a value there. Can even soften up the tops of these white areas. Maybe tighten up those white fuzzies a little bit more. Maybe even add a little bit more white in there just to blend it. Push it up into those darker areas. So I'm going to soften this whole edge right here too, to make it kind of blend in with the rest of the mushroom, rather than it just being a bunch of like fuzzies on the side. We're just going to kind of push it and blend it a little bit more. So I like that so far. Let's scoot on up. Let's scoot on up to the cap. This is the part that is going to be a lot of fun because it's so bright and it's just so fun. So we're going to grab the dark cadmium orange, and then on top of that I am going to use, let's use our deep scarlet red to blend. We might use the pale geranium as well. And this is where some blending skills are going to take place, because the top of the cap is a reddish color, and then you've got the bottom that's a reddish color, and it kind of fades into this nice orangey color. So let's start out with the, let's start out with our, I was going to do the deep scarlet, but let's do the pale geranium lake. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to first map out, I think that fits much better. I'm just going to map out where I want this red to be. And then also don't forget, you've got all those like shiny wet spots. They look wet. I was telling you a little bit about our mushroom, we like to hunt mushrooms and stuff. We like to forage. And there are some that have like wet caps and some that have like real dry caps. So this one is a young amanita, and it's got like a, I don't want to say it's slimy, but it's wet. So we want to portray that. You can see like the sky on that, on the cap there. So we'll leave some layers open to put some white on there just to give it a nice shiny look. And I'm just going through and adding just a little bit of this, just so that I can map out where all of my white spots are and where I need to put my orange and everything too. So I like to map out a lot of my stuff, especially when there's like a gradient. And what I'm doing is basically like obviously this is going to be red, that's going to be red, and in between is going to be this orange color. So let's see, look at my picture here. I will place my orange in there too. Make sure I'm getting it right here. And I keep looking at my black and white photos so that I know what I traced. That's why I like these so much, to trace this way rather than tracing with like the Da Vinci or anything like that, because I can go back and look to see what I was actually seeing and why I traced it. To some that might sound silly, but that's just how my mind processes. Okay, so I have that mapped out. I'm going to start with my dark cadmium orange, and let's start our colors here. Make sure so let's put a light layer of the dark cadmium. Let's bring it down this way. And then let's take our pale geranium lake, and we're going to do the rest of the cap, except for the white spots. We can bleed it a little bit into that dark cadmium orange here. It's a good thing to do that because we're going to blend them anyway. It'll be a nice transition. Let's do a light layer of this reddish color. I'm going to pull it into this orange just more. We're going to do a light layer of it all over. So once I had it all mapped out, I wanted to go through now and just cover it with a very light layer. And then get your dark cadmium, dark cadmium orange again. And put a nice layer on top of it. So I'm looking at it, we need to get more of a chalky kind of, I don't want to say chalky, but we need to tone down this orange. And the red a little bit too is more of a pinky up here. So let's work on our orange first, and this will require some mixing, kind of messing with it to get it to tone down. Okay, so this is where the color theories and stuff like that come into play. So let's look at it. We could add a burnt ochre Or we could go in for a cadmium yellow or even a yellow glaze. Now I say this because I know if I add yellow it's going to make it brighter, but I know that if I go in with a burnt ochre it's going to make it a little less vibrant. So there's a possibility that we're going to use quite a few of these, or all of them, or maybe none, you know, or maybe just one. So let's go in with the light yellow glaze. I worked with light yellow glaze before and it has done a really good job at lightening things up. So let's use the light yellow glaze, and we're going to come in on top of this and we're going to lighten up that orange. And of course red and yellow make orange, so this is going to help to just tone that down, and it'll keep it that an orange color because we already have the red in there, we already have the orange, so it's going to keep it. And I'm not going to go too far into the red with this because I don't want to turn this orange. I just want to add to the red and orange that we already have down. Okay, that looks good. Let's use, whoops, a little bit. Let's try going in with some Venetian red, actually. I'm going to switch up on that. So it's like a pinky red, and it's going to blend real nicely with that yellow, but still keep it an orangey color. It's so funny as an artist, you know, a lot of times I will go through and be like, oh, I'm going to use this color, I'm going to use that color. These are the colors that I want. And as I'm working in it, I'll just be like, well, I want this color instead. It's so funny how the brain works and how it'll change depending on what you're trying to achieve. And then when colors mix, you see it differently. And I think this is turning out really well. I think the Venetian red is also going to go really well with that red that we already have down. The deep scarlet, isn't it? No, it's pale geranium lake. Let's go ahead and put it in with that. And that red cap too, the top. This is a nice color. It's really smoothing it out really nicely, giving me that nice chalky kind of look here rather than just like a bright red. A nice blend. Let's do another layer of the pale geranium lake here, up in here. Let's do another light layer of the Venetian red. still think I need to lighten up that orange a bit. So I think I'm going to go through. Let's use some warm gray too. Let's see if that won't lighten it up just a little bit. Because I see more of a yellow over this way. Let's put some warm gray too. So it's going to dull it up a little bit. Don't freak out. Let's grab a little bit more of the pale yellow glaze, or light yellow glaze. I'm getting my colors mixed up. Light yellow glaze. Go over top of where you just put that warm gray too. It's going to give it a nice color here. We can even bring some down in here. It looks like we've got more of an orangey feel down this way too. And I'm being light-handed. Don't forget, you're not digging the paper, okay? Okay. Let's use a little bit of our cadmium orange again. Let's just kind of go very gently, super light. We're just mixing those colors. We're not digging at the paper, we're not pressing real hard. You're just mixing that yellow into where all those little spots are, trying to blend them in with each other. I'm doing the small circle method, or ovals, however you feel comfortable, but I wouldn't do the like straight line back and forth because you want it to be smooth, you want it to blend. And then let's use our cadmium yellow. Let's bring it in. It's starting to really come together. We're starting to get more of a nicer color here. Now you can probably spend hours just on this part alone, which isn't a terrible thing. But we'll move on after this into the spots. I think they call them teeth. I think mentioned it, what they call them a while ago. Hills. They call them scales. I just looked it up. See, I'm not good at identifying the parts of the mushroom, but I'm good at identifying if they're edible or not. So, let's use, because values are important, let's use a little bit of the deep scarlet. We're going to come in and add some deep scarlet in here. My pencils seem to be flaking a little bit today. going to add some of these deeper values in here. And some of these we have some deeper values like right underneath these scales. So once we get the scales all done, we'll be able to tell where our values also need to go. So what I want to start out with, and I know that this is usually not how we go, but I'm going to start out with white, to be honest with you, and I'm going to, let's just start with this big one in the middle. Let's look to see what we can do with it. Okay, so they're not, obviously they're not like a specific shape. They're just kind of like a crazy mess. So I'm just going to do my small circles. We're going to make our first scale. And what we want to look for in this is all of those small details with like the shadows. So first we have this one right in the middle. We've got a lot of shadows that are like up in here. And then there's some separations too, so we can't forget about that either. So we don't have cream in this set, which I would probably use cream, but we don't have it. So we've got white. I'm going to use my warm gray too, and we're going to start to make some shapes where all these shadows are. So there's separation right here. I think I'm going to color it. Let's see. I'm going to go with the deep scarlet red. I'm just going to kind of separate this just a little bit. I know it's going to look a little bit wonky because it's so bright, but it'll make sense, I promise. Okay, here we're going to come in like this. I'm just going to kind of follow these scaly bits here. Okay, and then let's continue with our gray. Okay, so the warm gray too. Let's put a little bit of a shadow here, and then we can put a shadow right here. Now it looks kind of out in space right now, but it's okay. It's kind of weird. So I'm going to use a little bit of the warm gray 5, and let's go along that red that we had in there. We're just going to kind of go along it just a little bit, very lightly, and then very lightly you're going to add into those darker values that you just made. So when we don't have the in-between colors, I'm taking a lighter, my target, or not target color, I guess, my lighter gray, and then I'm putting my darker gray on top of it. But then I'm going back through with my lighter gray again to tone that down and make a different shade, a different color. So do you see how I toned it down? Okay, but I still see the shadow there. So we're making a new color, one that we don't have in our set. And then on top of it, we go and we make our crazy whites here. So we can push a little harder, make it a little bit uneven. We don't want it to be like just lines and stuff, but we want to add to the shape and that it's rough. Like we want it to look rough, because it is. And the edges are very like non-uniform. They're just kind of like all over the place. So don't be afraid to kind of come out of these areas a little wee bit and make them a little jagged. You can even go over top of those darker areas and just kind of blend them a little bit more too. Okay, now that we have that, get your deep scarlet red and let's make some shadows in here. Take some of your orange. Okay, so it doesn't look exactly like the shape of that, but I really like that anyway. So I'm going to, since we did that, I'm going to fast forward this and do the rest of the scales, and then you can just meet up with me and we'll work on the blurry background and adding all the other details. We'll probably work on a corner and then speed it up, and you can do the rest of it on your own and figure out, you know, your comfortable spot in that blurry background. So we'll see you back for the background. So I basically followed the same pattern that we did for that one scale. I based everything out in white, and I just took special note of the shapes and also if there were any like cracks in the scales where you could see the cap. And I even went back through with the red and orange and took some of that white away. Some of it you can work with and kind of play around in some reverse drawing. You can kind of, you know, peck away at some of the edges. So we used again the warm gray 2, and we added some of the value, and then went back in with the warm gray 5, and then back over top with the warm gray 2 to blend. And then adding white, of course, on top for the highlights of those scales. Now after I got all the scales finished, I went back through with the red, the deep scarlet red, and you can also use the dark red as well, and I did go through with that just to get a deeper tone on the cap. And of course I'm over here tweaking, just trying to pick apart some of these shapes in here. Sometimes these things can be quite confusing, especially as how, you know, it's so white, so it's really hard to see those values. But I just made some fun little values in there, and also I added a little bit of raw umber in that white and gray just to give it a little bit more of a natural feel. I didn't want it to just look like it was plastered on there, so used a little bit of the raw umber in there just to give it more touch, I guess. I'm just working around, fixing all these little bits. It's good too to step back and look at it to see if it's actually being effective. Sometimes we can get so close to our paper or so focused on one spot that we can't see the whole picture. So it's good to step back and to look at what you are doing, and just make sure that what you are doing is how you want it to look. Of course, touching up all these areas. This is like a bite mark down here or something. I'm not sure if it's a scale, but it looked more like something tried to eat it, like maybe a slug or something. Still just working on some of those edges. A little bit more of the raw umber. And just tightening up those nice dark areas in the scales. Now if I had cream in this set, I'd probably be using a lot more cream. Now you can also use some yellow in this as well. Kind of like we did with the raw umber down below on the stem. You can also use the same thing and it'll make it like a creamy color. So, but I decided just to go with the white and the gray, and I thought it looked really well. Okay, so before I move on to the rest of the picture, I want to go through and kind of tidy up some of these values and then add our shiny spots. So this area is really dark, and instead of adding more red, we're going to add some of our walnut brown. We're just going to darken that up just a touch. So I don't want to put black. It will make it way too muddy. In a lot of cases, I don't mind using black at all. I really like to use black actually. But in this case, because it is such a bright color, I don't want to use it. I just want to use a little bit of this walnut brown, kind of blend it into that red. Can even bring it up this way a little bit. And then if you want to just darken it up a little bit more, get some dark red in there. And blend out that walnut brown. And I also wanted to mention I used a lot of raw umber inside of those whites up there too, just to darken it up a little bit. Now I'm looking also over at my picture here, my black and white, and I want to add a little bit of this walnut brown just in this little bitty corner right here, just to give it a little bit more depth. And I like that. Okay, so let's look for some more dark areas. We've got some darker sides over here, so let's just add a little bit of this walnut brown. Let's bring it all the way around here. And go light across the orange. We want to darken it, but we don't want to take that orange away. We got some shine in here. There's about a little deformity in the cap. So we can just add this little bit of a line here, and we'll add some shine there as well. Okay, and then take your dark red and then let's blend out this walnut brown. So look at all the areas that are a little bit darker. I mean, it's not too dark down in this area, and there's some dewdrops that I missed on there. But this is pretty dark in here. And then just blend it out with your dark red. Seeing a little bit of dark right in here. I'm just going to darken this a little bit more. And then now we have our shiny spots. Now those are very, very white. So let's sharpen up really sharp here with our white. And let's go around on here. We're going to make our shines. Now this might seem a little weird, but it's just add little bits here. And I'm not pushing hard, and I don't really have to push hard. So let's go, it kind of like goes around all these scales, and you get kind of like this nice abstract sort of look. So let's bring this a little bit here. we got some abstract that comes down this way. And this is what's nice about Pastel Map, is you just get to do light over dark and it's fine. Otherwise, if we were using Bristol, or if you're using a different type of paper that's more smooth, you may have to go through and map out where all of your light areas are and kind of protect them a little bit more. It's definitely not like Pastel Mat. I used to use Bristol a lot, and I kind of got tired of, you know, protecting those areas, and I just kind of wanted to draw. So that's why I made the switch. There's a little bit here, and then we got another one that comes up. Now, if you wanted to use, you don't have to, but if you wanted to use like a whole bean white, you could use it. I feel like they're a little bit too like gummy. They seem real gummy to me, and I have a really hard time using the whole beans. A lot of artists like them, but I feel like they're just too, I don't know, they're just gummy, in my opinion. It is a nice pencil though. I mean, they are nice. They do produce very nice work. Okay, we got some. Let's see, we got a few little pieces in here, and I might, it sounds kind of strange, but I might actually add a tiny bit of blue in some of these shine marks, just because, you know, it's like the sky, and I can see a little bit of blue in there. It's almost on this side here, maybe a little bit in here. There might be a little bit of purple like up in here too. It's just really, a lot of this is honing your skills on recognizing color and values and adding them where you see it, where it's appropriate. And now I'm just adding all of these nice shines. We'll move on to that fuzzy background. Got that already. There's a shine over here. So we don't have as much shine from like this point down, but a lot of it is in this cap edge over here too. We might have one over here. There. So let's look here with our blues. I'm going to use the light ultramarine. That is one of my favorite colors of this set. And just because we use it once, we might have to go back through and lighten it up. So find some of these little areas. Let's put a little bit of blue in there. I'm being very light about this too. And then go back over it with your white, just so that it blends in there and you get a nice lighter blue. So now that we have all the blue in there, sharpen, I know our white's not that dull, but let's sharpen up that tip just a little bit, and let's make some brighter areas versus some darker areas. So we got some brighter areas. Let's see. Just some more contrast to make it look like a shine. Looks pretty good. Looks like there might be a couple lighter ones in here. Okay, so let's add a little bit more of a contrast on some of these. I'm just taking my dark red, just kind of going around some of these areas. Let's take our warm gray 2 and let's tone down a little bit of these areas so they're not just one color. And allow for some breaks in these shines. Okay, so this set has a lot of nice greens, so we can do, and we'll probably come back through and mess with our mushroom a little bit more once we get the surroundings. We got to make sure we get some good values in there as well. So we're going to need some browns, some greens. Okay, I don't think I want emerald. Maybe we do. So we got some greens, and of course we know that yellow and blue also make green. So we can mix those colors if we need something a little bit more dark. So let's just start. And of course this is fuzzy, so we won't have to worry too much about it. Just got to find my landmarks here. I think I'm going to start in this area right there. So let me get out my browns and all my greens. So I'm going to start with the light green. I'm going to lay down this, just this layer of light green, and I'm going to watch all the fuzzy parts, okay? So we have like this moss. It almost, like I said, it almost looks like princess pine, but it's not. It's definitely moss. So I'm just going to come alongside of this, and I'm just going to add these finger-like moss protrusions here. But we're not going to keep it, we're not going to like make it extra detailed. Okay, so it is fuzzy, it's out of focus. On top of that, let's add the earth green yellowish, because the light green is a bit too much. So this is also where you got to watch too. This is what will add depth to your photo. If we leave this just really light like this, it's not going to look right. So we have to deepen the color some way. So that's where our browns come in. Our raw umber, the walnut brown. The phthalo green I think is going to be a little too I think it's going to be a little too blue. I don't think it'll do it justice, but okay, let's see. Let's start with a little bit of the raw umber. And we're just going to keep our small tight circles. Okay, let's add a little bit of the walnut brown. Of course, towards the tips of these pieces, it's a lot brighter, so we don't want to dig too much in there. Let's take some emerald green and let's blend those out and make a darker green here. Because of that brown, we'll be able to blend a lot of that brown into the green. Okay, now get back out your earth green yellowish. I'm going to work a little bit backwards. I'm going to bring it from the tips down into where the brown is. Okay. And then even the light green we can bring on the tips. Just keep it so that it's not in focus. You don't want to be super hard line in it. You just want to kind of do some light circular motions. Bring it in towards the center here. Okay. So now behind that we have an even darker green. So this is how we're going to tackle that. So let's do some walnut brown. We're going to go in between those protrusions there that we just had. Give some depth here. Keep the small circular motions going. And this part also has some finger-like things going on here. Okay. Now let's put on some emerald green over top of that. Not hard. You don't want to like dig in the paper. We just want to add a light layer on top because we're going to continue to blend it, and you don't want to blend this into it either. And if it gets too sharp, I'll show you how to make it fuzzy again. I'm going to use a little bit of the earth green yellowish just to help get that nice green color. And if you think this is too sharp, let's take the earth green yellowish and let's just go along the edges like this, and you just sharpen or fuzz it up. Let's try some raw umber in that. A little bit of light green in this other one. Let's get it a little bit fuzzier since that green is starting to get dark down below it. Some more earth green yellowish. And then let's darken up a few areas. This is pretty dark in here. So this, the background will probably use black, quite honestly. The earth green yellowish. I'm just blending in some of that walnut brown. Let's add a little bit of light green at the tips of these. And I'm adding just like a few out of focus circles. Like that also helps with the illusion that it's like out of focus. Might be a lighter one here. Those little tiny details are what makes it happen. Okay, so now we're in this little area. There's a blade of grass. There's all kinds of grasses in here and just shapes. We have, let's do this. Right here. There, I think that looks good. Okay, some emerald green too. Let's do a few more of these little things that are coming off of here. So I'm kind of going over top of that green because those are grasses. And I'm kind of going over top of it very lightly with this walnut brown, and it's shadowing it and making it look like it's behind all this stuff. So it's very helpful to make it look, you know, dark and that it's like underneath. Okay, let's grab some of the emerald green. Now, of course, I don't have these lines anymore, but I'm going to put these in anyway. Just kind of looking to see where they go, map them out. There's only 3 of these. And then we don't have anything for a little bit until we reach up a little higher. See about here. And all of these have like these little fingers on them, like little, look like ferns almost. I'm just going to step that all the way up. Let's grab our light green. Get out your raw umber and let's darken up some of this stem now. See how it's making it like a darker green, like a woody kind of green. So let's just watch carefully where we place this. Let's just do a little bit kind of at the base of these. So how we stepped it up here, like we did little steps kind of back and forth. So we're going to do the same thing with all these little leaf things coming out here. I don't know much about grasses or moss, but let's use the earth green, yellowish. Okay, so all the little like leafy parts, we can kind of just, this is such a small piece, so you can almost just sort of fake it a little bit. Give some of these little make them a little wider. Okay, and then lighten those up a little bit with some little bits of light green here. Just want to highlight a few little areas. And then raw umber. Let's go in and kind of add some darker values in there, just to break it up a little bit. Our burnt ochre. There is a piece of, it looks like it might be like a pine needle in here. And then we have, let's see, let's use a little bit of some warm gray too on that, just to tone down that brown a little bit more. You can even add just a little bit of the raw umber on top of it. That looks nice. Nice and toned down. Let's do this leaf that's right here. We got a lot of darks in there. Let's actually start with a more neutral color. I'm going to start with my raw umber here. I'm just going to outline all of it like this, and then we're going to color it in like very light. Just color it all in. The light hand here. So let's use a little bit of our walnut brown. It's a lot of reds, and looks like there might be a little purple in there, magenta. I'm going to use the magenta in it. Let's grab some dark red, and I want some magenta. Let's get some magenta over here. Use a little bit of dark red in there. A little bit more of walnut brown. I'm going to look at some shapes here and find where we want these areas. Looks good. Okay, let's put a little bit of some shine in there. I'm going to use the white. I'm going to come in, let's see, we've got right here. Kind of fades. And then we have a shine on the edge here, the top edge. It comes down around here, and we have more of a magenta in there. Okay, it's looking good. Bring the magenta a little bit down this way. We've got a little bit of magenta going in this way. Quite a bit down here. It's kind of like an anchor right here, like a, it kind of shapes like an anchor, if you see that. That was dark red. And this shine goes about right there. Add a little bit more here of white. And then let's add our shine here. Now if you need to tone it down, or if you feel like you need to smooth it out, use some raw umber in that. Now we got some other shines happening down in here as well. See, bring this up in here. And let's tone it down a little bit with some raw umber. Really just bouncing back and forth in between all the colors, just blending, finding that nice sweet spot that, and we get a hold of the, you know, the blurry, and just looking at all of our shapes and values and tones. Get some dark red in here. Blend it out with the raw umber. Can add some of our shines. Tone it down with some more raw umber. Now I'm seeing that there's, in what I traced, I got too wide here. So, and that happens. I'm not too upset about that, I guess. I'm going to add some of this darker and just take away some of that leaf. And this is all pretty dark in here, so that's kind of a saving thing here. Okay, so we have a lot of brown, like lighter brownish kind of looking areas here, and I'm looking to see, okay, I'm going to use my burnt ochre. I'm going to create that little pine needle. There's a lot of just different shapes, and you just have to watch for them. And as you're going, what we'll probably do is finish out this area, start moving up this area, but I think after a certain point, I mean, it's just, you know, it's about all the same technique, all the same motions, and then just really picking apart a lot of these areas. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to speed it up and you're going to be left to your own and create the rest of this fuzziness. Now, just like we did up here, make sure that you use your circular motions and you kind of just fuzz up the edges. So, and then we just do a lot of switching back and forth in between colors and creating that nice blurry background. Got my walnut brown. I'm going to come in around the edges on this. It's pretty dark. And in this area there's like another bit of this, like this type of plant, the mossy kind of look. I'll bring this a little bit. And if you're finding some of these are a little bit too bright, because this looks like kind of weird now because this is much darker than this, so just go over lightly with your walnut brown here, and then go back over top of it with your ochre, your burnt ochre. And what this does is it just blends those colors and makes like a new color. It's a darker shade of that color. So you don't have to necessarily always have the perfect color on hand. Now sometimes that is helpful to have the perfect color whenever you have like limited layering abilities on a paper. We don't have that on the pastel mat, but this is always nice to know these techniques of like darkening things and lightening things and how you would go about, separating some of these areas. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to start now moving along into this area. This is the earth green yellowish. I'm going to start to place our little pieces of plant in here. I'm going to overlap some of those too. And bring it all the way down to this darker spot. I'm going to darken it up with some of my emerald green. Very light layer. And then the earth green yellowish. Now I'm going to start doing some reverse drawing here and kind of poking backwards into that green to make those fingers kind of look a little bit more noticeable. Let's use a little bit of our raw umber. I come into these green areas, just putting a light layer of that. A little bit more earth green yellowish to kind of blend that brown into that green. So this plant is not super bright, but we're going to add some lighter spots, some lighter areas. Just because this is such a out of focus picture, we want to make sure it looks out of focus, so you get these like different spots of like lights and darks, and that's what it makes it, give the look of being blurry. So let's put one right here. kind of push hard in the middle and then get softer as you go out. And then I think we're going to put just a few like randomly in these little areas. Let's add a little bit of the walnut brown. I'm just going to keep switching back and forth to make these fuzzy plants here. Okay, so what is in this area here? It looks like there might just be a little bit of a green area here, and this is the earth green yellowish. And I think what gets real tricky is all these shapes that you're trying to follow. And sometimes if you just feel like you've got it down and you just want to, you know, go across it, that's also fine. You can just go ahead and take your creative side and just start to place them where you see fit, how you like it. Okay, let's see, where else do we go here? So we've got this dark kind of comes up under here. We got more green under there. I think these little tiny details are probably the hardest whenever you're trying to create something. I mean, there's so much busyness happening, so many shapes, so it's not always a terrible thing to go in and just kind of have fun with it and not follow the picture itself. I think that that's fine if that's what you want to do. Let's see, I'm just going to come alongside these. Maybe, I don't think this is very dark in here, but I want to separate it just a little bit more. And I think after this picture is done, I think I might just give it to my husband. He loves these mushrooms. He thinks they're so pretty. I don't think we've ever actually found one of these, like a real one. Different subspecies probably, but not like this one. We always see some that are similar that grow under like pine trees and places like that. Okay, so after you have that, I'm going to go in and we're going to get some of these other shapes in here. So I've got some green that comes along here. Kind of comes up into like a brownish area. It's a darker color up in there. We've got a lot of like almost grayish, brownish. And then here we've got another plant, another fuzzy plant like this and this down in here. Kind of bring it down here. Now again, we're going to darken all these up, so don't feel like it looks really out of place right now, because it does. I mean, it's going to. And then we have like from this area kind of, let me see, where am I at? I didn't trace everything because there's just too much. So I just kind of traced like a few areas that are nice little like landmarks, like the lighter bits and maybe the darker areas too. So we have a few like finger-like protrusions here. And remember, these don't have to be super sharp either. They're definitely, you know, a darker color, and they're definitely out of focus, so don't feel like you have to get all those teeny tiny things. We're just kind of making some shapes right now, and then we're going to fuzz them all up so it doesn't really matter. You can go into this brown a little bit even. Okay, and we're seeing some, let me get out my warm gray too. So essentially what we're doing, when you add gray to a color, you're making a tone. When you add black, you're making a shade. And when you add white, you're making a tint. So we're going to make a tone with our raw umber and our gray. So first off, we're going to map out where these like grayish brownish colors are. Just bring them down around, and then let's add some of our gray. This is a lighter gray. It's almost like it would be a tint, but we're going to keep adding and just kind of messing with, and then it's a possibility, as dark as this is in the picture, we may end up having to use some darker grays. Let's try it. Let's get wild. Warm gray 5. Let's do our tiny circles, blend those colors. Now it's going to look a little bit like spotty, but you're going to go ahead and blend them out with your raw umber again. And then we'll go back through with our warm gray 2, and it blends it very nicely. So we've got a nice tone there. And then I think let's go in with our, oh, my pencils are just flying everywhere. Let's go in with our walnut brown. Sharpen up this edge just a touch, and in between these two areas here to separate them just a little bit more. And even go over top them just to add a little bit to it. And I'm going to add just a little bit of some green in there too, even down here, and just darken these areas up. This will add some depth. If you add your browns and you go over top of it with some greens, it just sort of, I want to say it shades it up. It just kind of muddies it a little bit, and it gives it more of a deeper feel, like you're looking into like these shadowed areas. So a while back last year, I did a portrait of a dog named Merlin, and behind him he had all these ivies and leaves, and it was quite impressive, like how much detail that had. And like looking back, like I had a little bit of anxiety because of how much work I knew was going to be involved in that piece. But you know, it took quite a long time. But I'm telling you, if you just take your time and just push through all that hard stuff, and then really just tweak all these colors and make them, you know, do what you need them to do and mix them, I mean, it comes out looking fabulous. So just keep pushing through. I'm gonna fuzz these edges up just a little bit more. I might even add some in here just to give that more of a fuzzy look here. So even though we're working with a lot of abstract kind of feels here, you're seeing something emerge. It's kind of like, I want to say a pattern, but it's not really a pattern. But you're going to be working more or less in a pattern, finding your groove. I always talk about finding the groove. And basically you're just kind of like getting the feel of what you're actually creating, what you're making, and then you just kind of, it goes really quickly And that's what happened with the picture with Merlin, is that I found how to, it took a while, but I found out how to do those leaves, and then all of a sudden I was just, you know, doing them and not even thinking about it, just not even thinking. And that is on my Patreon too. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the amount of work that there is, just one leaf at a time. And really it helps to just step back and find that groove. Okay, I'm going to use my light green on these leaves down here. I'm going to make some circles by pushing kind of hard in the middle, doing a small circle, and then slowly lifting my pencil and blending that outer edge to make like a fuzzy out of focus piece. Can even do just a little bit more in here. And see, that kind of looks a bit better. I feel like I'm finding the groove finally. I mean, it's not exact like the picture, and we can always go back to, we can add some darker areas with the black. I mean, there are some darker areas, and you can go very lightly so that you don't just like black it out, but you can add just a little bit in there just to give it more depth. And it just makes it just a little bit more interesting when you add those little pieces. See, it already deepened it up quite a bit. And you're just adding just a few little spots and specks. Just gives it a little bit more. I like it already. So let's try to finish out this area, and then I think I'm going to start, I might keep moving this way, or I might go up that way now that I'm looking at it. But I think after this you'll be finding your groove, so I'm going to speed this up, and then after this part, and then that way you can kind of go off on your own and figure out your groove and create. And that's ultimately what we want, is for you to learn how to do this. I think I'm just going to add a little bit of green in here. And it looks like there's probably some greens in here too. I'm just going to add a few fingers in there. And then down here we have, yeah, this is where that, we have a little bit of a fern going on in there, and we got a stick here, so that green goes over top of that brown very nicely. So got a lot of darker colors in here, kind of crisscross over each other, so don't get too caught up in just, you know, making it super perfect. I mean, if this is just for practice, you're just having fun. If you're doing this because it's on the beginners page, I have been trying to start to do like a mod challenge in each month. So this would be the mod challenge for February. But if you're just, you know, a visitor and you decided to jump in, that is also fine. If you're not a part of that group, you should go be a part of that group. It is a lot of fun. We have a lot of artists, a lot of beginners. We've got a lot of professionals. Everybody sharing tips, everybody helping each other. So it is a very nice community, and everybody just kind of wants to learn. So we've got a lot of fun things happening over there. If you are a part of that group and you're doing this challenge this month, definitely posted. Last month I had quite a few that posted what they did, and I was super excited. Last month we had marbles. That's what it was. We had some marbles, and that one was a lot of fun. It was tricky because, you know, it's in the dark, and it's also posted here on my YouTube, of course. But yeah, it was tricky, but it was good. So, and we had quite a few that did it, and I was so excited that everybody, you know, tried it and was enjoying it. Okay, I'm going to come along here. Let's darken up some of these areas. And we have one. I think we're going to do this. Let's get out. I got my light green. I'm going to do some of those fuzzy lighter areas. And the circular motions really help. I know, like in photography, when you have like those circles, you can see if it's like out of focus. You can see what it is, but it's kind of like iffy whenever you're like looking at it. You just see like blurry circles. And that's kind of what we're going for. And that was light green, and now I'm using the earth green yellowish, just kind of softening some of those areas. And then we have, let's see, where am I at on here? Okay, that's down below. It's like here. This is that, it's like moss, but it kind of comes here and then it kind of just like shoots out to the sides. And we have, these are those darker areas. Some of these that I traced are the darker areas. Of course, I'm not going to do it all the way down, but now we can kind of, and now I'm not even looking at the picture, I'm just kind of adding some of this. Some shapes with the earth green yellowish. Okay. And this little area, that is a dark area. Seems like right here is like a dark area. This is too. Can even bring it up in here. And the reason why I'm not worrying too much about these dark areas, because the green is going over top of it very, very well. So it kind of just blends with it and then makes it look like it's a deeper part of the floor here of the forest. So let's do some little bit of texture here on either side of this. And then let's work around here. Get some more of our walnut brown. I'm going to be very light about this because I don't want to drown out those super dark areas. I don't want to blend those together. I just want to add a little bit on top of that green. But then we want to be able to see these, so I'm going to avoid those. And then get my earth green yellowish again. Just make sure I kind of tighten those up a little bit. Add Add some more textures. You can even sharpen up your light green and add a few of the lighter bits on top of those so that we can see them a little bit better. Gives it a little bit more texture, makes it a little bit more interesting, and I think that looks good. Let's put a few up here. Okay. Get out your earth green yellowish and let's kind of create some of these darker greens back here. Okay, when we get into this area, we get a lot of different browns and burnt ochres. So we've got a lot of like pine needles, it looks like, underneath here. Add a little bit of burnt ochre here. Add a little bit of the walnut brown. Okay, and then of course we've got a lot of black in here, but we're going to hold off on that just like we did with the others. We're going to allow this brown to be in here, and then we'll sharpen it up. Okay. Now I'm just trying to find where I'm at. So here at the base of the mushroom, I think we're finding our groove. So if you're finding it and you just want to fast forward, go for it. I'm going to continue for a little bit longer, and then we're going to speed it up and get past all this. And this is pretty darn dark under here, but I think we're going to add some gray rather than just keep going with brown, although the brown looks really, really good. Kind of going in between all of these little bits. It kind of looks like a crazy mess right now, doesn't it? That's okay. It will soften and it will look right. And the process is so hard when you know what you want it to do, and sometimes it just doesn't go that way. So don't freak out. It's going perfectly. Push through that ugly phase. This is the ugly phase. Okay. Okay, so now that we have all of that, I'm actually going to go through and lightly put a layer of this over top of all these green areas. I know we just went through and darkened all that up. We don't want to lose that though. Okay. I don't know what my kids are singing, but at least they're not fighting, right? Just recently I was doing a tutorial and I had to stop the video because they were just at each other. It was terrible. What do you do though? It's starting to go well here. I'm starting to see a lot better. Okay, get your dark phthalo green. What's the other one that I have here? I might use that one too. The emerald green. I like it too. Let's use some emerald green instead. And then of course you have my fish tank in the background that's just like sputtering and spitting, so I'm sorry. I need to try to fix that today. Okay, so now this little piece here is not quite as out of focus. It might be a little bit out of focus. It might have been like a shaky photograph, if you know what I mean. Like sometimes it's a little blurry because it might be a little shaky, but it's not bad. So, and it might be just a little bit out of focus, but I wouldn't say it's not like up here. You can definitely see some more details on it. Like you can almost see some, you know, lighter areas, like maybe some dewdrops a little bit. You got some wet areas, so we'll be able to add some white on top of this. Once we get all this kind of in here, we'll add some of our light green on top, and then we will add some of the white as well. Alright, so let's keep working on this little bit down here. And I'm going to fuzz it up just a little bit because it is a little bit more in focus. We're going to blend some of that emerald green that we have in there. Get back out our walnut brown, and let's get the finer details here. Just the in-betweens. I think after we finish this part, that's when we're going to go off on our own. Okay, let's bring it all the way over. So the trick on this one is going to be your light green and then the white as well. So we just have lines right now, kind of like we had on this. And then with the light green, you're going to use it to make your finer details and highlights. So we're just going to bring out these little tiny bits here. And then do some opposite work here to make them look a little bit more like plants. And give them more of a texture. See how nice that looks, just overlaps over top of that. Just kind of making it a little more textured. And it's not exact like the picture, so that's okay too. Now in this area, Let's just kind of add little bits of texture in here. Let's kind of go all the way up. We'll add some darker greens in there too. And just go all the way up to the top. If you need to sharpen, go ahead and sharpen. I'm getting a little bit of a dull tip on that. And adding these highlights will help separate it from the darker background as well. So it's always nice to have that nice contrast. Okay, so let's get a little bit of emerald green. Let's work a little bit in between these areas, just a little bit. Just want to add some more texture. They almost look like little braids, don't they? Okay. And then use your walnut brown. Let's kind of just like deepen up a little bit. Do a little bit of some reverse drawing. If you need to sharpen, don't feel bad, just sharpen. It's a very small picture, so these really tiny areas you need to sharpen often. I try sometimes just to sharpen the pigment area instead of actually digging into the wood, and I just hold my pencil at a harder angle so that just the pencil touches the edge of the blade whenever I'm sharpening. And we can darken up some of this, because some of these are almost like just a bit darker. So let's actually darken some of this. Maybe even come over here, throw one into a darker area, give some more movement to it, more depth. Earth green yellowish. Let's get some more of these areas a little bit smoothed out. It's looking good. Now in between some of those areas we can make them a little bit darker. Some of them, not all of them. Kind of like how we were a little picky choosy up here. So let's see. Let's make a little bit of black in here. Maybe I'll make a little black right here. So once you start like adding more of these bits, like it just adds more to it, makes it look really cool. Let's put a few darker spots in here. Going to tone down some of them with the walnut brown. And then because we have so much shine, let's actually use, instead of going straight in with white, let's get our warm gray too. And we're going to add a few of the shine marks because it's bright enough. Don't need to go in with the white if we don't want to. Now if you want to use the white, you can. Might make a couple of brighter whites, you know. They kind of come up just about in here. Okay, we can use some white in that. Let's make some brighter spots. I'm going to try to follow all those gray spots that I had on there. Put a few more. I'm going to try to soften them up by doing small circles, making almost like a tint here. Okay, now that that is done, of course you're going to probably go around and darken it up as you see fit and keep adding to it, which is fine. But I'm going to continue. We're going to speed this up and you're going to be left on your own, but you can still watch this sped up to see what I did. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on the Colored Pencil page on Facebook. And it's called Colored Pencil Tips for Beginners. And if you join, I'm there every day. And we can, you know, connect that way. Or even you can follow me on my Patreon. It's $5 a month. Also, don't forget, if you like this video so far and you finish this out and you want more, don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on the other ones that are coming up. So for the remainder of this video, which is about 25 minutes, we use pretty much the same techniques as we did in the first part of this background. I wanted to say to really focus on the shapes and what you're seeing. It sometimes can be really hard to make things out of focus. So I know my brain tends to want to sharpen everything up and make sense of it. But in this case, you know, you want to do like circles, kind of random lighter spots, and just following shapes and making weird things. It's like abstract, but don't let it freak you out. Now I did also add some red to this, into a lot of the picture actually. If you look real close, there are some reds, there are some blues, mostly on the right side of this picture. But I used a lot of the earth green yellowish as a base. I used the light green for those fuzzy shiny spots, the highlights, And then I did a lot of like reverse or like backwards kind of drawing and kind of etching out some of these edges. You want to make sure too that your values, that you have darker values, that you have lighter values, that they contrast really well. And, just focus on some shapes. Now, if you're having difficulty with seeing it, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and make yourself a viewfinder. Now, viewfinders, I believe I talked about this already, but viewfinders are like, you could get like a sheet of printer paper, cartridge paper, and cut out like a little square of like maybe 1 inch by 1 inch, since this one is so small. And when you cut out a little square of a 1 inch by 1 inch square, you can focus on one spot at a time. Rather than seeing the whole picture and all of the shapes all at once, you can see just a small part of the piece, and it can help your brain to try to, figure out what's actually happening. Don't let it scare you. Don't let it think that you can't do it. I used to struggle a lot with blurry backgrounds, and I've done them so much now that I'm pretty comfortable saying that, I like them now. They're okay. They sit well with my mind. Not like before. Before was a struggle. I remember messaging a friend of mine who helps kind of critique my work and helps me kind of figure out what the heck my brain is doing at certain times and why it looks the way it looks and not the way I want it to look. But I remember a few times I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's just not working. I can't figure it out. But what others see is something beautiful. So even though we're having our meltdowns in our minds and freaking out and, just having a fit, and I'll say a fit because I've had some fits, but just know that what other people are seeing is not what you're seeing. They see something beautiful that you're creating. So don't let it get you down. Just keep pushing through it, learn from it. Slow down and just take note of what your brain is doing and what your hand is doing. And, you have those internal fights all the time, but quite honestly, it turns out fine. And a lot of times you just have to push through some of the hard things. I also added some of the yellow in there, the cadmium yellow, and, some burnt ochres, and just kind of try to give it that nice woodsy feel. Since we do have a small amount of pencils, I just went in and did a lot of mixing, which is good though, because you want to know what the pencils will do with each other. You don't want to just pick every single time the perfect color. Now, if it were a Bristol, I'd probably be picking the closest color that I can to what I need, my target color, because I have very limited layers on a Bristol. And I know I've kind of driven this home every time I talk on my tutorials, but the paper choice does matter. If you have only, let's say, a 5-layer capacity, and as opposed to like a 20-layer capacity, you're going to probably want to play and mix a little bit more when you have a 20-layer capacity than you do with a 5-layer capacity. Just because, you want to be able to get the correct color. You don't want to have to keep playing and then potentially with the 5 and you end up going to like 6 or 7 and it's not blending anymore because it's burnished and it's all muddy now. You don't want to ruin the piece. You don't want to ruin your surface. So, 5-layer capacity is not bad. There are some amazing artists out there that do the drafting film, and it has a lower capacity for layers, but it creates amazing work. But yeah, I would just really learn how to mix colors. If you don't have a color wheel or you don't know like the basics, which I would say as an artist, most artists know the basics of like color mixing, like red and blue is purple, stuff like that. So don't think it's too much of a task, I guess, is what I'm saying, to mix some colors. It's not terribly hard. And especially when you have some nice base colors, like in this 24 set, there are some really nice base colors that can get you a really nice natural look. I mean, this picture has some vibrant colors, very bright reds and oranges, and then the really crisp whites. But then you mix it with like this woodsy background with some browns and greens. And I mean, it's a really nice set to play with, especially with mixing. And that's one of the challenges of this entire thing, this entire tutorial, was to learn how to mix these colors to make them do what you want them to do, rather than, you know, grabbing in my giant set and I can just, you know, pick whatever I want. But also too, so there was the other thing. As a beginner, I always tell, you know, people to grab that app, the Colored Pencil Picker app. And in the beginning, that was like so crucial for me. That was the turning point in my career, because I was having trouble because there were so many colors of the colored pencils that, like, how would I know that mixing a lime green with, you know, a yellow or a red, I mean, you know, you think about that, you know what color it makes, but then whenever you mix them, they react differently because of the pigment, and it's just such a different color, you know. So the Colored Pencil Picker app really helped me learn to better mix my colors, I guess I should say. Now, it's not always right, and I always tell my students or anybody who's asking that now that I know a lot of stuff, like, I will argue with it mostly, and a lot of times I go against the grain on it. I still use it if I can't figure out something, like if there's like a color that's like so weird and wonky and I can't get it, then I usually end up asking like my artist friends, like, what colors do you see, because the colors that I see aren't mixing well, and then usually it gets pretty much figured out. I mean, you know, it's a task, but it's worth it, honestly. So all that to say that with this particular tutorial, the 24 piece of the Polychromos is not in the Colored Pencil Picker app. So there was no way that I could use a crutch. There was no way that I could use anything that would help me. So I had to just use my knowledge. So this was actually a bigger thing for me because I got to test myself to see if I knew exactly what I was doing. So we're all learning, and just saying that, you know, I don't want to say I'm a beginner, but I would say that I am an intermediate going into professional, and I do this for a living. So to think about my growth and to think about your growth, you know, we all see our artist people that we look up to. I mean, I have artist people that I look up to, and that, you know, that sometimes I get down about it, but then you need to use that, you know, that push of how they're doing and what they're doing. You need to use that fire as, you know, a way to push you out of your comfort zone and get you, you know, started into your own journey. It's not bad to have those people we look up to. It's not bad at all. So definitely make connections, talk to people. Usually artists are pretty good, especially on the Colored Pencil Tips for Beginners. We have a lot of professional artists on there, and a lot of them are willing to help you to do better. Everybody is usually willing to help you if you have questions about colors, or if you have questions about the values, or pencils or papers. We've got lots of files on there that really help. Now, I wanted to say too that you also want to find your own niche. Like, you want to be able to find your own way, something that sets you apart. And I know this is like kind of like throwing you out into like a weird business thing right now, but I guess it needs to be said because it's coming to mind. But something that sets you apart from the other artists. And I mean, there's tons of artists that do the same things that I do. There's tons of artists that do, and I'm by no means, you know, super popular or anything. I mean, I have followers, but like, it's not a crazy amount, but I am so thankful for the ones that do follow, the ones that do create. You have no idea what it feels like to be a creator and someone creates your stuff and posts it and says, hey, look at what I created, and it's like, wow, it just is a good feeling. It's a really good feeling. But anyway, sorry, kind of went off on a tangent there. Sorry for chit-chatting so much. But also, with the whole business side, if you're looking to do this as a professional, making your own pieces, selling them, it's pretty fun, but it can be one of those daunting things where you just think you'll never get there. But ask your friends, ask your artist friends for help. Business wise, you got to find something that sets you apart from the other artists. And a lot of artists, you're not just selling your work, you're selling yourself. It's a piece of you. Your art is a piece of you. So when you're looking at this and you're like, oh, nobody's buying my stuff, nobody, I'm not good enough, or everything like that, it might just be a matter of some people might not know. The internet is so hard because there's so many people. So get out to your local vendors, sell at some craft shows, just set up. Even I've never made a sale at a craft show, but talking to people is such a big deal. Hand out your card, just get out there and show them who you are and what you do, and be nice and friendly, and more than likely they'll be giving you a call in like 6 months. So don't count yourself as not a good artist. Sometimes you need to get out and show them what you do. Okay, so now that I've yacked your ear off, let's step back into the piece here. Now, this was a darker area up in this corner, and I did a lot of reds in it too, and some magenta, I believe, as well. And then I just kind of did some highlights of some circles and a little bit of some orange in there as well, just to give it more texture and more just personality, I guess. So these little branches, they're like sticks. I don't know if you've ever walked in the woods and you see like the sticks that the pine trees drop. You have like these little tiny sticks, and they kind of get gray, and they're really, really textured like a pine tree would be. So they're gray, and then they have like these white highlights and stuff on them. So a lot of the sticks in there, if you see, I put the highlights on there, and with the warm gray too, and then did a further highlight of white. Also, I wanted to say too, to break them up into different shapes of how you're going to work. So each piece, I kind of went to a certain point, like, okay, I'm going to render this drawing to this point. So in between these two sticks, I'm like, all right, I'm going to render this point, and then I'll move on. I wouldn't normally do that. Maybe I would, but I did in this case because there's so much information in just one little piece that it's really hard. So I kind of essentially made my own little viewfinder, but I just used a few landmarks instead of cutting something out. I kind of used landmarks that were already on the picture. So, and then I'd finish it, and then I'd move on. So here's my next landmark. Okay, I'm going to render this picture down to this stick. So I kind of did that throughout the piece, and I didn't really notice it until I hit like the top, and I was like, oh, I'm breaking it up into smaller areas. So I went through and I mapped out some of the lighter sticks and stuff that were in here, and then I darkened up my darks. I had some greens already in there mapped out. And then I added some more of the lighter sticks, which was the cadmium yellow, and then I put the warm gray 2 on top, and then I used some raw umber as well to kind of tone those yellows down. So why I mixed the raw umber with the yellow, I would mix that to tone down that yellow, and it kind of brings it to more of a lighter brown, like that yellowish does. So that's why I did that. It's a good mixing couple there. And then I just started filling in areas. I didn't really, I think at this point I kind of was still looking at my picture, my reference photo, which I always look at it, but I wasn't like following it to like the exact. So I was just kind of like looking at it, getting a feel for all the base shapes, and then I'd go through and I just started like having fun and just playing with it and where I wanted these lighter spots to make it interesting, and some of the darker spots as well. Now I'm using the warm gray too, and I'm just going through lightening up some of these little sticks and giving them like circular, like some circle spots in there that are like shiny, darkening up some of my greens. And then of this one, we're going to be adding the blue. This is where the blue is. If you look real close at your reference photo, you can see some shines of blue. Sometimes, whenever I was a lot younger in my career, I really had a lot of difficulty, especially in black dogs, to see the blues and the purples. I couldn't see magentas. I couldn't see anything. I was just seeing shiny black, black and white, gray. I couldn't see those other colors. But once you start to really focus and you really start breaking things down and you recognize your colors, and I'll never forget, we went down to Kentucky last year, and when we went down there, it was really funny because like I remember, like I couldn't stop thinking about the piece that I had. Funny how you go on vacation, you can't stop thinking about the artwork that you have at home. But I think I was hitting a rough spot, and I was like thinking of like the color mixing and what I was going to do to, fix it. And sometimes I'll dream about stuff like that, which is really helpful because then I get up the next day and I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. But anyway, we went to Kentucky. I couldn't stop thinking about the piece that was on my table. And I was having problems because I was seeing animals, and my brain was just like cycling through different colors that were included in the fur of these animals. And like when it was shining out, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see blue, I can see purple, I can see green. And like it was just so distracting, but it's so good because you'll notice that stuff. Like you'll notice more and more detail as you grow. More and more color information will come to your brain because you're focusing on the colored pencils and their colors. And once you start mixing them and once you start playing with them and learning them, like you kind of start seeing these in real life. You see like the crimsons, you see like the light changes and all the value changes and different things, and it just becomes so different. My view of the world has changed for the better, I would say, just dramatically since I started colored pencil and just really focusing on color theory and just colors in general. It has become quite interesting and comical to see, my husband's reaction, of course, whenever I say, oh my gosh, do you see that? He just rolls his eyes because I don't think he sees what I see. And, some people just don't see what an artist sees. So you are very, very lucky to be an artist. You see things differently, you feel things differently. And even though you may not consider yourself an artist, or if you are having trouble considering yourself as an artist, which that was something that I struggled with too, you're not alone in that. It took me a while to tell people what I do. Like, I'm an artist. Everybody kind of rolls their eyes at you and thinks you're nuts. Like, oh, you just stay at home, you don't work. It's like, no, we do work. We have things that we complete. We have beautiful things that we sell. We have wonderful things that, we're commissioned to do. So call yourself an artist. Start calling yourself an artist. If you're doing this, you are an artist. You're doing things. You're creating, making something beautiful. And, look around the world around you and see the colors, see the changes in the lights and the values of things. And it's just so different living as an artist. It really is. So consider yourself lucky to see the world differently. Moving on to the picture. Again, the same techniques. I did add a little bit more black on this side. It seems just to add some more depth. Now we are kind of in the home stretch here, the last part of the picture and the tutorial, and I'm just kind of staring down at what I'm doing and looking to see, it's all pretty much the same. I'm using my earth green yellowish as a base color for the greens. I'm still going through adding my light green as the highlights of the green areas, and I'm just working through just slowly. I mean, I know it's fast on here right now, but just take your time. This is not, this whole project it took me about 7 hours to do. And typically I try to keep the videos on YouTube to a minimum of about 2 hours. So this is a bit overkill on the YouTube, but I really wanted to make this piece beautiful. And I did actually tell my husband that I was going to give it to him, because he did say something, if nobody wants that, I really like it. He was kind of hinting, which is the very first time that my husband has expressed wanting to keep one of my pieces. This is like his favorite mushroom. He thinks it's very nice, and he really liked my picture. So it was really nice to have him express that, but it was also just as nice to say, well, I was thinking about giving it to you. He was pretty excited about that. So anyhow, just keep moving through. Also, when you're finished, or when you think you're finished, step back. Maybe even take a photograph of it. A lot of times if you take a picture of something, of one of your artworks, it tends to change in the picture. But don't beat yourself up about it though either. You don't want to just completely ruin yourself by like endlessly tweaking your picture. Just step back, take a picture of it, look at it, mess around with it a little bit, but don't kill yourself over it. You don't want to make yourself bored with it or anything like that. And I know that I tend to do that. So if I'm just sick of looking at it, I'll be like, okay, I know this is done. I'm just being super picky about it, and I know that that's not what's going on. I'm just being too picky, and it's ruining it. It's ruining the whole thing for me. But anyway, we are at the final stages. Continue to work this out. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll be making one every month as much as I can, and I'm on the search for the next one. So I hope to see you back here next month, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you're part of the Colored Pencil Tips for Beginners, or if you're a part of my Patreon, or even a part of my personal page, definitely my personal art page on Facebook. If you're a part of that, share it with me. Share what you created. Tag me in it. I'm super excited to see what you create as an artist yourself, because you are. If you're here, you're an artist and you're learning. So I want to see what you make, and I'm excited. So thanks for watching. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to me yammer on. But we are at the end, and we will see you next time.